Good evening. Time then for the press preview. We're checking out Monday's front pages, and joining me tonight to look at the headlines, the political editors of the Daily Mirror and The Sun, Pippa Crerar and Harry Cole. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight, keeping cool at home. A very good evening to you too. We'll chat in a moment after we've looked at those front pages, starting with The Guardian, which hears that we should know who the next Prime Minister is by September the 5th, after the rules were laid out today for the Conservative leadership contest. The FT understands that the former Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, will attempt to stave off criticism for refusing to offer tax cuts if he becomes Prime Minister by saying he'll do so only once inflation is under control. In fact, that's also the lead for The Times, which says allies of Boris Johnson are rallying behind Liz Truss. The Foreign Secretary, meanwhile, has reportedly warned the right of her party to back her or let Rishi Sunak into number 10. That's in the Daily Mail. Now, according to The Telegraph, the government is mulling plans for a first-of-its-kind national heat emergency in the coming days. The Metro reports that the former F1 boss Bernie Ecclestone is to be charged with fraud after an investigation into overseas assets believed to be worth more than £400 million. The Sun praises athlete Sir Mo Farah for coming forward to admit that he was smuggled here from Somalia as a child and that Mo Farah isn't his real name. Quite remarkable, that. It also makes the front page of The Eye, which reports the Home Office has dismissed claims he will be stripped of British citizenship. And don't forget, you can scan the QR code you can see on screen during the programme. Check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you listen and watch us discussing them. And we're joined tonight by Pippa Crerar and Harry Cole. Lovely to see you both. What a few days it has been, and what a few days it is going to be. Let's start with The Guardian, Pippa. The rules are set. The race is very much on. Sir Graham Brady outlining how it's all going to pan out a bit earlier this evening. 20 backers needed to get on the ballot. Is that reasonable? Are the rules sensible?
They certainly are. I mean, this is the broadest Tory leadership campaign for a long time, for many, many years. There's 11 candidates thus far, and we may yet see more as nominations close tomorrow. We might yet see more sticking their head above the parapet. And obviously, the big concern, as far as the 1922 committee is concerned, that backbench executive of Tory MPs, is that there's so many pressures facing the country with cost of living crisis, and there's obviously the conflict ongoing in Ukraine, that they can't really afford to have a government that is basically, in a sense, paralysed, the caretaker government not actually able to take any sort of substantial action to tackle some of those issues, which is, of course, what the Boris Johnson government now is, that caretaker government. So they want to crack on as fast as possible to allow those candidates, the successful candidate, to get into number 10. And of course, there's still this sort of question, this cloud, if you like, about Boris Johnson's integrity. And there's a lot of unease remaining on the backbenches about the fact that despite the fact he's resigned, that he's likely to be in number 10 for another couple of months. So the consensus is that they want to crack on as fast as possible. And the best way to do that, given the breadth of the fields, is to increase the threshold, as they have done, not just on getting onto the ballot paper in the first place. That used to be 8, and it's now gone up to 20 MPs a candidate would need to back them, but also getting through to the next round, and that's gone up to 30. And the plan is to sort of put this on fast forward, have a couple of votes this week, and hopefully the final vote to decide the last 2 candidates that then go to Tory members across the country early next week.
So what it means, Harry, is that we know 11 people on the list so far. Many of them may not even make the first stage.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure many of them shouldn't have really made this stage, frankly, given the calibre of some of the people that have been expressing interest in throwing their names forward. Normally these things happen, sort of 5 or 6 MPs throw their names into the hat for leader. It shows you just exactly what the Prime Minister, the current just about Prime Minister's allies, were sort of warning late last week when it looked like he was going south. This time last week when it looked like he was going south, is actually what is your alternative? And it turns out the Tory party have stabbed the most electorally successful Prime Minister they've had in 30 years and replaced it with, frankly, what is looking like a fairly embarrassing circus. And I think the sort of wiser hands of Graham Brady, it's less about what Pippa says about this unease about Boris Johnson staying in office. That started to dissipate really since the end of last week. And actually, it's about lasting damage to the Conservative Party's reputation as a grown-up, competent party when they can't even decide. 12 of them, half the cabinet who were in the cabinet last week but no longer in the cabinet, thinking that their colleagues are frankly crap and not good enough for their own support. It looks really bad. Well, so you can see why the public elders have rushed forward to try and get them to sort this out quickly, because it's frankly getting a bit embarrassing.
Well, Harry, we know they want to speed the process up. We're still not going to get a new Prime Minister, a new Conservative leader till September the 5th. I mean, that gives us loads of time, doesn't it, for the Tory party to tear itself apart. Lots of blue-on-blue bloodletting.
Absolutely. I mean, that's already started, frankly. So far, we've had dodgy dossiers and, Nadine Dorries, the ultra-loyalist to Boris Johnson's been out already tonight, accusing Rishi Sunak of being a part-timer who was spending all his time plotting his leadership campaign. You've got Rishi Sunak coming out tomorrow. I think the embargo is just about lifted, so we can say this. He's basically going to call his rival candidates liars and being dishonest with the public by suggesting that they can have all these wonderful tax cuts that he calls fairy tales. And that's only going to get worse. You've got James Cleverly, I think, in the Times tomorrow, from what I was reading just before we came on air, saying that actually Rishi Sunak was a Labour chancellor, which is, frankly, wiser hands are saying, be careful now, because the new leader isn't going to inherit a government and an election-winning political party. At this rate, they're going to inherit a bin fire.
Let's have a look at, we just showed you the front of the Financial Times. We can have a look again. It's a similar theme. Sunak to defend tax stance by vowing cuts once inflation is tamed, Pippa. He's pretty much on his own, isn't he, when it comes to tax policy? At the moment, he's the bookie's favourite, though. What's going to happen to those more on the right? Are they going to have to come together and sort out who is best to stand up against him?
I think almost certainly. I mean, this is a big issue on the right. I was talking to lots of MPs today that are concerned that the right is being split between several candidates. I mean, there was a poll, a Conservative Home poll of Tory members today, which put Penny Mordaunt at the top, closely followed by Kemi Badenoch, who, of course, doesn't have as much experience, but has kind of captured the imagination of many on the Tory right. There's obviously Liz Truss, who was previously the favourite amongst the Tory membership and still might end up on the final ballot of the last two if she can persuade enough of those into the ERG, the pro-Brexit grouping, to back her. Some of them are a bit cautious because, of course, she was a Remainer. She was a long time ago a Liberal Democrat, and they might prefer the more authentic approach or beliefs, if you like to put it like that, of someone like Suella Braverman, who is currently sort of the ERG candidate. So there's a battle going on there as well, and it has started to get a bit nasty, really. But as Harry rightly says, the Tory party has this long contest ahead. Yes, the early stages are going to be over by next week, but then, of course, we have 2 months pretty much of the two leading contenders going around the country, and they need to be really careful that they don't end up looking more like they're more interested in infighting than they are in running the country. And we all know, we've seen a lot of Labour's experience historically, and we've seen that with other parties as well. The public don't have any patience, particularly when they're in the middle of a cost of living crisis, for what they regard as the self-indulgence of politicians fighting amongst themselves rather than putting the interests of the electorate first.
Yeah, and looking at this sort of Conservative obsession with tax when people have got a lot more to worry about on their plate at the moment. Let's bring in the Daily Telegraph, Harry. Poor old Sajid Javid sweating away at his news conference today. As Javid swelters, Sunak says he will cool it on taxes, is the headline there. What's quite interesting is that there was a poll of Conservative Home readers, several thousand Tory party activists today, which showed that Penny Mordaunt is at number one in terms of who people want as leader. And Sajid Javid actually quite far down the pack.
Yeah, there's a real suggestion tonight that while he might get the 20 votes requisite to get onto the ballot on Wednesday, it's not necessarily guaranteed that he's got the 30 to stay in on Wednesday's first round, a fairly brutal elimination round there. Now, look, Sajid Javid is I felt quite sorry for him today, actually, launching on the hottest day of the year, and I think it was Sky News that had the sort of temperature gauge in the top left-hand screen of sort of 31 degrees at Heathrow Airport, just as he was standing up in a very small, crowded room in Westminster to give that speech. But he got through it in the end. I particularly liked the bit where he called for a clean campaign and everyone to stop, having a go at each other, and then proceeded to tear chunks out of a number of his rivals. But that's what we can come to expect for the next few days. But really, I think we should know by the end of this week who's really in it. And I think the expectation being that it will be Rishi and another in the final two. And there's a big push by Liz Truss to sort of unite the right, as Pippa was saying, whether it will be her or another candidate. I think she can play on that cabinet experience that she has. The fact is, she has dealt with crisis. She's been at the forefront of the UK's response in Ukraine. And frankly, junior ministers, Suella Braverman, yes, she was in the cabinet, but she was a law officer. And Kemi Badenoch, a junior minister for paperclip, somewhere levelling up, I think it was. Yeah. You can make a pretty good case that when the red phone is ringing at 3 a.m, as the famous US TV ad goes, who do you want answering it? Do you want someone who's never been tested before, or someone who's been at one of the top 4 jobs in the cabinet? So I suspect we'll hear a lot about that in the coming days.
Yeah, Pippa, just a very quick thought. We've got to go to a break, but just wanted to get your thoughts on the front of the Mail. Truss, back me, or it'll be Rishi, echoing your comments earlier.
Yes, that's absolutely her strategy. She wants to be the other candidate going through to the final round to the members, because she thinks, I think probably rightly, that faced with the choice of a candidate to the right and Rishi Sunak, the membership may well back her.
OK, great. We will speak again in a moment. Coming up after the break, we're going to be talking about why yet more hot weather could lead to a national emergency. Do stay with us. Hello again. We're going to talk about the heat wave now with Pippa and Harry, front page of the Daily Telegraph. Pippa, it might reach 40 Celsius this weekend. We could see the first ever national heat wave emergency declared. What would that mean?
Well, it would be pretty dramatic. I mean, we're sitting here already, aren't we, all sort of feeling rather lethargic probably at this point in the evening, but we could see it potentially rise another 10 degrees. I've got a sister who lives in Perth in Western Australia, and periodically she tells me that it's 40 degrees there, and I'm taken aback by how they manage to cope with it. But of course they've all got aircon and they're equipped for it. We're not in this country. And there was a Telegraph reports that there was a COBRA meeting, an emergency meeting inside government today to talk about this emergency. Which could have an impact on everything from roads and rail. I don't know whether you saw the really quite striking images today of a track in London bursting almost spontaneously into flames, a rail track, because it had overheated and one of the electrical points had exploded as a result of that heat. We might see schools having to close because, of course, schools in this country aren't equipped to deal with extreme temperatures. Very few of them, if any, have air conditioning. Mostly it's a case of having to kind of wrestle the rusty windows open to try and give the kids a bit of
They've all been open because of COVID, haven't they? They're getting quite used to that now.
Well, maybe so, but it's certainly not the same as aircon, is it? And there's even suggestions that it could obviously create pressure, huge extra pressure on health and social care, not just, of course, because whether they'll be able to manage logistically, but also because, of course, elderly people will be particularly vulnerable, and many of them are the occupants of care homes. So the people looking after them will have to do a great deal to try and keep them cool and hydrated. So, there's obviously a lot of concern. It's not something we're used to. We see this in Britain when we have extreme weather. We also see it in the winter when we have extreme weather. We're just not really very well equipped for it because we're not used to it. So I think a bit of careful planning and maybe not try to take life a little bit slower would probably be a good.
Harry, one very quick thought on this.
This is, again, a story I'd class as COVID broke Britain. The first instinct now is everything is an emergency. Everything needs a COBRA meeting. Everyone has to stay at home. It's too sunny. It's too wet. It's too cold. A little bit of snow. The whole country just breaks down and everyone wants to stay at home. I just think we need to snap out of this as a nation.
And reach for a glass of ice water.